Por la lluvia, por el puente que hay mañana, el lunes, o sea que bueno, mil disculpas. Muchísimas gracias por estar aquí. Una vez más es un placer estar aquí en Letras Corsarias. Gracias a Rafa y a todo el equipo y a todos vosotros que con el día que cae también se agradece muchísimo que hayáis venido. Es la primera vez que Tom está en España, en Salamanca, así que muchísimas, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Gracias Seba por toda la presentación y por lo que vamos a charlar, digamos, en los próximos minutos, en la próxima hora. Como todos conocéis, pues Tom es ilustrador, es autor de cómics, es autor de tiras cómicas, ha trabajado pues, en grandes cabeceras como pues, The Guardian o ilustrador para las portadas del New Yorker. Y bueno, estamos aquí hoy para hablar de física para gatos. Él tiene como varias vertientes en su obra. Está por un lado pues las tiras cómicas relacionadas con el mundo de la cultura, con el mundo de la literatura. Luego también están las relacionadas con el mundo de la ciencia, para las ilustraciones que hacen en The New Scientist. Y en este caso pues Física para gatos es una recopilación de estas tiras cómicas de las revistas científicas. Y pues por último tiene sus dos novelas gráficas largas que son pues Munko, Policía en la Luna y Goliath. Así que bueno, muchísimas gracias a todos. Yo creo que Rafa ya os explicó que Tom va a hacer una pequeña presentación de su proceso creativo y bueno, las viñetas, una lectura también de las viñetas durante más o menos unos 10 minutos y ya a partir de ahí empezamos la charla con Sebe y luego firmas y pues, si queréis hacer más preguntas. ¿Vale? Muchísimas gracias a todos por estar aquí y es un placer ver la librería llena. Gracias y you can start.
Okay, do I use this one?
Yes.
Is that on? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thanks very much for having me here tonight. I'm sorry this is all going to be in English because I don't speak any Spanish. There are a few Spanish words on the visuals. So these are my new cartoons. Physics for Cats is the new collection of cartoons. These appear weekly in New Scientist magazine. He's saying, if that's CERN, I'm not here. A kind of classic man hiding in the bar joke. So I make these cartoons every week, and they're always about science. And this diagram will explain the title of the book. So this represents all the things that are science, this circle. This circle is all the things that are cats, and the place where they cross over, I guess in the real world, is scientists researching cats, but maybe in the cartoon world it's a cat scientist. And this third circle shows you all the cartoons that are in the book. So as you can see, they're all about science, and a very few of them are about both science and cats. And none of them are about cats, but not science. So we'll start with one that is about cats and science. Science cat. Smash. Once again, the experiment confirmed my hypothesis, but further research in this area is required. Got too much writing going on. I love science. And this is the original drawing in pen and ink, and below it is the inspiration, who is my cat Luna, who I'm being very unfair to Luna. She's never pushed a cup off the table, but she is quite a naughty cat and inspired some of the cartoons. So these cartoons appear every week in a science magazine, and sometimes the idea just comes out of my mind, and sometimes it comes from a real science story. And this little film is from a real science story. I can't remember why, but for some reason scientists built a tiny car and taught rats how to drive it. And my favourite thing about this little video is if you watch The Scientist, she literally jumps for joy when the rat starts driving the car. And I feel like if I didn't make a cartoon on a subject like this, they'd probably give me the sack. So this is my cartoon. 2019, the rat learns to drive a tiny car. 2021, the rat moves to the suburbs and commutes to the lab. 2023, rat car industries is a huge success. The rat gets a chauffeur. 2025, the rat sells his rat car shares for billions. 2027, Despite all his riches, that rat feels empty and alone. 2029, the rat returns to a simple life in the sewers. And then we can see a little gif of the rat when he's very happy. I think he's moved to New York there. Do you ever worry that we are living in the reflection rather than the reality? Sometimes. This one's called The Device. I created this device to test my theory that our entire reality is a simulation. But the readings I get suggest something much worse. What? We're living in a cartoon. Does it at least have a good punchline? Nope. The first iteration of our artificial intelligence system had the brain power of a newborn baby, but it was designed to learn and grow over time. We believe that it's now functioning at the level of a teenager, but we can't be sure as it won't come out of its room. I hate you. So this is another story which kind of inspired me, was the US Navy released some footage of UFOs, and they were so kind of blurry and rubbish that I thought I'd do a cartoon about a blurry UFO. This one's in the form of a Venn diagram. Pursued by aliens. Flying object. Hat carried off by the breeze. This one's called Maths Puzzles for Conspiracy Theorists. A train departs at 2 p.m, travelling at 40 miles an hour. The next train follows an hour later, travelling at 45 miles an hour. Why are we still using trains when the government has hyperspeed UFO technology? Susie brings 18 apples and 12 oranges to school and divides them equally between her 6 friends. How many of these children are in the pay of Big Fruit? When Tom was 8, his sister Anne was half his age. Tom is now 49. So why does Anne just laugh at him when he patiently explains to her that the earth is flat? Do you ever get the feeling that we are being observed by another life form? Do you ever get the feeling that we are being observed by another life form? Do you ever get the feeling that we are being observed by another life form? And this is another true story that inspired a cartoon. Again, I can't quite remember why, but some Chinese scientists developed a bicycle that could not only ride on its own, it could, as you can see in the video, chase people in a slightly sinister way. They put it on double speed, which makes it look kind of funny and terrifying. So that inspired this cartoon about bicycles. Bicycle disruption. 2025. Autonomous electric bicycles are released onto the streets. They scan the pavements, offering their services to potential customers. 2035, the bicycle population gets out of control. Feral packs haunt the back streets, hijacking pedestrians and taking them on long, unwanted rides. 2045, the bicycles fuse into a colossal vortex of frame, tyre, cog and chain that traverses the globe, sweeping whole cities away on decade-long journeys. And here's a picture from London today. This one's called The Abyss. I stared into the abyss. The abyss stared back. One thing led to another, and now I meet the abyss for regular chats in the coffee shop near my lab. And that's a page of doodles from my sketchbook. I work out all the cartoons first in my sketchbook, so I kind of try out different things there before moving on to the final drawings. This is inspired by my daughter, who has a kind of app that she listens to pleasant things when she's trying to sleep. Soothing sleep soundscapes for scientists. Grant gratitude. A calm voice reads a long letter approving your grant proposal. The sound of newly purchased equipment being unpacked plays in the background. Laboratory lullaby. A 3-hour recording of the quietly harmonic atmosphere of a well-run laboratory, with occasional whispered compliments from contented colleagues. Peer review positivity. The editor of a prestigious journal congratulates you on every aspect of your paper, while a chorus of your rivals gently weep with envy. In conclusion, there is no single universal time. Rather, there exists an infinite number of times, each specific to a different place. Therefore, defining any exact, unambiguous point in time is impossible. Peter, I don't know why you can't just say, sorry, I'm late, like anyone else. This is another picture of a cat. This is Callie, my publisher Megan's cat. And I took that photo, she took that photo for scale, but now I've seen the book, I realise Callie is an absolutely enormous cat. So that's not too helpful. We'll end with one last cat cartoon. This one's definitely inspired by Luna. But I just let you out. So that's my reading for tonight. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Tom, for this funny presentation. I really like your strip, your comic strips. And I think my first question, as I always do, is I always ask the authors that come here the question I like to do. My personal question, so to speak, that I think interest for the rest of the audience. You are the first comic author that make this kind of comic, that makes comic strips, as the word in English is cartoons, which is really difficult to translate in Spanish because they have another implications. But you are the first author I have the pleasure to talk and make it as kind of comic, and make it a comic strip like the classical comic strips of the newspaper. What is the difference in the process behind doing a normal comic book, so to speak, like Goliath or the other comics you do, as opposed to do a 4-panel or 5-panel strip weekly? What is the difference in that process of doing a simple gag?
I mean, the craft of making the drawings is exactly
The same, of course.
But the difference, well, the two differences, I'd say the first difference is for the short cartoons, I need a lot more ideas. Every week, I need to have an idea.
Another gag, so to speak, another joke.
Yes, or before that even, just some little spark of inspiration which sets me off thinking about a cartoon. So I'm like the Terminator. I go through my life with a red dot, just spotting things.
Just looking for something.
Could be a cartoon, could be a cartoon. And I fill my notebooks up with that. So the big difference with these cartoons is the ideas are smaller, but I need more of them.
And I suppose in your notebook you have a lot of ideas, because since you say you are scanning everything to look for ideas.
Yes, and I'll put down bad ideas, half ideas, quarter of an idea. I think of my sketchbook as a kind of compost of ideas out of which maybe something good can grow. So I'm always putting things in there, even if I think it's a terrible idea. I write it down.
Do you often come back to that terrible ideas, or are you just more you see something each week that you like and that you can inspire you and put it in that week?
Well, on a good week, I have a good idea and I make a cartoon of it. In a bad week, when I have no ideas,
you have to
I go back and I find
the compost box.
Find the compost or the idea that's like a little broken bird, and I sort of fix its wings push it out the window and hope it turns into something funny. So it's useful having a huge store of unfinished ideas for the weeks when nothing
happens.
Exactly. And the other difference is space. The space I have in New Scientist magazine and The Guardian is quite small, and so I really have to edit the cartoons down to their most simple form. Partly that's good for telling jokes anyway. The simpler the better, really. But the space forces me to do that, and it's in a graphic novel you can have a very quiet sequence where nothing happens for a while.
And the rhythm of the story, of course, is much slower, obviously.
Yes, and I enjoy doing that. But in the short cartoons, there's very little space for that. Yes. And it's hard work to get a single quiet panel. Sometimes you need it for a joke, but it feels like a real puzzle to get it in there.
Bueno, le he preguntado que cuál es la diferencia en el proceso de hacer un cómic más largo, como puede ser Goliath o un cómic normal, de comillas, aunque no me gusta definirlo así, con la diferencia de hacer unas tiras cómicas, unas tiras de cómic tan precisas. Básicamente lo que me ha dicho él es que la diferencia mayor, bueno, el estilo de dibujo es similar, no tienes que cambiar mucho, pero la diferencia mayor es que siempre tiene que estar, ha dicho, escaneando como un Terminator, buscando ideas que luego guarda en un blog de notas. Le he preguntado también si recurre a ese blog de notas de vez en cuando, y me ha dicho que sí, que cuando no pasa nada en esa semana que tiene que hacer una viñeta, tiene que, como lo ha llamado él, como una caja de compost, como una caja de... Es que es difícil de traducir, compost. Es una caja donde crecen las ideas y él vuelve, cuando no ha pasado una de esa semana, de vez en cuando tiene que volver, recuperar unas de esas ideas que él no considera que eran buenas y cogerla para esa semana. Have you ever thought about, because some strip authors do it, try to count a long story using these strips? Or using recurrent characters, trying to form some kind of long narrative?
I have thought about it often, yes. So I forgot you had to translate what we said, so I'll try and keep my answer a little.
No, don't worry.
Yeah, I think I quite like to have a weekly cartoon of the style of Peanuts, or one of these cartoons where you come back to the same characters, because it doesn't feel like starting afresh every week. And I've often thought that, but for some reason it's just not how my brain works. When I make a story, at the end of it, a short story, or even my graphic novels, the characters feel finished, and I haven't yet found a natural way to continue any of those stories.
You feel like the story you have told that week, the short story you have told that week, is done. There is nothing more to add, so to speak.
Yes, and I love comic strips like Peanuts and all the millions of comic strips which are like that. But
even the superheroes at first were comic strips at the newspapers.
Yes, exactly. But then the comic which I think is my biggest inspiration for the form of these is Gary Larson's Far Side cartoons. And he did what I do, which is every week is a fresh beginning. Maybe in the same world, in the same tone, but each is separate. And for some reason, that's just how my brain works.
Le he preguntado si él alguna vez ha estado tentado de usar estas tiras para hacer una historia un poco más larga o crear un intento de narrativa haciendo personajes recurrentes, y me ha dicho que no, que a él no le sale, cuando él exhibe la historia no le sale el hacer una continuación más larga, que la historia le pide que esas 4 tiras o 5, las que sean, ya ha contado todo lo que tenga que contar, y no es que no le apetezca, es que no le sale volver a esos personajes de nuevo. Él quiere cada semana contar una historia nueva. Regarding your art style, that reminds me a little of Cutlass of Calpurnio, those characters, those simple characters without faces. I find it very difficult, it's a testimony of your quality of your art, to convey the emotions you convey. It's mostly joke stories, joke gags, but I think very difficult, very impressive how you translate these emotions in mostly faceless character, because the characters most of the time are just shadows or simple sticks even. Do you find it difficult sometimes to try to convey the story you want to tell with this art style? Have you tempted to try something different, to try a more defined faces or a different art style?
When I started making comics, I was in art school and I was an illustrator, and I was making very, very, very bad illustrations, and I was trying to be angsty and dark, and I was trying to make photorealistic, scratchy drawings copied from Dave McKean's work, which was my favourite comic at the time, and I just failed. It was terrible. I couldn't do anything which I liked at all. And that was when I was making illustrations. And when I started making comics, I found the process of writing a joke or a story and conveying it in a comic so difficult that I didn't have any spare time to try and add on the twiddles and fanciness and fakeness of trying to copy someone like Dave McKean. And I just made these little stick figures, and I think on some level I thought, I'll learn to make comics with the stick figures and then I'll move on and make a more painterly, artistic sort of comic. But as I made them, I realised actually almost everything I wanted to do I could do with the stick figures. And the fact that they're so simple and so universal allows you to, I think, almost sympathise with them more. And I think some of those emotions you're saying I put in there, I know they're in there, but I think it's mainly you as the reader putting them in there.
It's the reader that is putting themselves in the...
And I think readers like that. They like when you give them a little hint and you let them finish things on their own. So it was kind of an accident, but I find 90% of the time I'm very happy working with little stick figures and faceless characters. Occasionally there are things you can't do, and I just have to find a way around that using one of the other tools of comics. But I think probably everybody's style has some blind spots that they have to work around.
As one of your readers, I can tell you, your figures really works. Because for something that you say, we put together, we feel the planks, the sticks, so to speak. Le he preguntado si por su estilo, por un poco anteculas, a combi de calpurnio, sus figuras poco definidas, esos sticks, si le resulta difícil alguna vez intentar hacer algún chiste, alguna de las historias, limitado entre comillas por esas figuras. Me ha dicho que no, que es tan bien como le sale, y que él lo que busca un poco es que al ser figuras tan simples, somos nosotros los lectores los que ponemos esas emociones, que él nos da como una pequeña pista y que luego nosotros rellenamos los huecos. Yo he dicho que a mí personalmente, como lector suyo, me encanta y me funciona, porque logra que con esas tiras, a poco que hayas conocido tengo algunos amigos que han estudiado ciencia y han hecho algunos trabajos, y libreros, bueno, libreros conocemos unos cuantos, que en su otro libro tiene de tiras, hay unas tiras de libreros. Las situaciones están tan bien explicadas y son tan reconocibles que enseguida nos pones tú las emociones. Why doing the strips related to physics, related to science? Was just because it was a job for the science paper, or was your preference to remark? Because I was telling the audience that you have another book that I love, the strips about the rage of the librarians.
Yeah.
Because the librarian, I know a lot of librarians, including that one.
Right, yes.
And I love them. Why making strips about physics, about science? Something relatively different from the librarian world.
Yes, it is different. Well, I'm in no way educated as a scientist. I stopped studying science as a teenager in school and went into studying English and art and the art world. But I kind of have always been a fan of science.
You and me both. I studied movie writing and writing, but I always been a fan of science. I have a lot of friends scientists.
Yes, no, me too. My grandfather was a marine biologist, and he would read New Scientist magazine every week, and when he was finished with it, he'd give it to us. So it was always in my house. And I was working for New Scientist making illustrations for their articles, but not comics, illustrations. And then one week I'd self-published some of my mini comics, And I really liked the art director there, so I sent him the mini comics, and I wrote a little postcard and said, if you ever want a weekly cartoon, just let me know. And he emailed the next day and said, can you come in and meet the editor? It's crazy we don't have a cartoon, and we'd love you to do it. And I was a bit shocked, because I'd been making weekly cartoons about books for The Guardian, so I knew that, but I was worried that I didn't know enough about science, and the scientists would think, who is this clown? He doesn't know what he's talking about. Yes, and I was worried that they would not enjoy my work, or that I'd get things wrong, but in the end it turned out to work out okay.
Did you have to make, I suppose you did, you have to make some research for those strips? Apart from what have you told in the presentation, looking for these scientific anecdotes, because I'm not scientist, and some of the terms you use are really unknown to me. There are some real science there, so to speak.
Yes. Well, the research for both The Guardian and New Scientist is mainly finding those interesting ideas. So finding the rat story, that's great. And once I know, oh, that'll make a fun cartoon, then I can use the internet, or I can ask someone at New Scientist to get the details right. And my feeling with details in these cartoons is they should either be right, or they should be so wrong it's clear that it's intentional. So some jokes it works better if it's totally mad and wrong, and sometimes if I have a formula on a blackboard, I like it to be related to the topic, and maybe you and I would just see it and think it's a bit of set decoration, but the night before last, an astrophysicist came to one of my talks and said, oh, I noticed you had the correct formula on there. So it was like an Easter egg for him, and that made me very happy.
Le he preguntado que su cómica, el libro de tiras que se publicó aquí anteriormente, una recopilación de tiras sobre libreros, que es un mundo que todos conocemos, claro, y cómo acabó haciendo un libro de física, unas tiras de física. Él me ha contado que en su familia, de hecho que es un poco como yo, ambos hemos estudiado cosas de letras, pero somos fans de las ciencias absolutos, y en cuenta que su familia, su abuelo fue científico y que siempre hubo copias de la revista de ciencia, y que él empezó haciendo ilustraciones para esa revista de ciencia, para New Scientist, y que una vez en unas ilustraciones él le mandó también una pequeña postal, una carta, diciéndole que si en algún momento querían que hiciera tiras cómicas o tiras para la revista, que se lo dijeran, y la respuesta inmediata fue que por supuesto, que por qué diablos no lo estaba haciendo ya, básicamente. Le he preguntado también si, al ser un mundo que desconoce, tiene que hacer mucha investigación a la hora de hacer las tiras, aparte de lo que nos ha contado de buscar esas anécdotas de la rata conduciendo o las bicicletas dominando el mundo, y me ha dicho que realmente él busca la anécdota, después busca por internet, o le pregunta a alguien, por supuesto, pero realmente la investigación principal es eso, buscar la anécdota que poner. Y ha contado también un pequeño easter egg que le ha metido en una de sus cómics, que le gusta, por ejemplo, si en una de las tiras hay una fórmula en la pizarra, que él y yo vamos a ver que es una fórmula más, pero le gusta poner que esa fórmula sea real. Y él cuenta que en una anécdota, que en una de sus charlas, le vino un astrofísico, ni más ni menos, y le dijo, una de esas tiras, la fórmula que has puesto en la pizarra es correcta. O sea, que le gusta mucho hacer esos detalles. I don't know how much time we have, because... What time is it? Okay. What's next? What's your next project apart from these strips you are doing for? Are you going back to continue or to do another normal, so to speak, comic book? Or are you more comfortable doing these strips?
Well, you're definitely right. I am more comfortable doing these strips. There's something about a weekly deadline and a small strip and a feeling that somebody's waiting to receive them, and they'll be angry with me if I'm late.
When we read the scripts in the newspaper.
Exactly. And it helps me focus my mind and stops me becoming a complete perfectionist. So I find the rhythm of making the strips.
We have a really short and serious deadline. You have to be done in a week.
Yes,
basically.
and I think it works very well for short, funny strips to be forced to make a joke and to get on with it. And that suits me very well, and I hope to continue doing both the science and the book strips for a long time. And I make illustrations for other people's articles and book covers and things, but I still love the form of the graphic novel. The one story in a book where from the moment somebody sees the cover on the shelf and comes over, you're starting to tell them the story with every aspect, with the design of the book, with the words, with the pictures. It's just very hard. It's very it's so much harder than making these strips and finding the spark of an idea which isn't interesting enough to keep me going for one day's work. It's interesting enough for a couple of years' work. Means graphic novels are hard, and I'm very slow, and I'm very impressed by anybody who manages to do them. So my next project will be a graphic novel, and when I get back from this book tour, I have to go to my pile of unfinished ideas and
the compost
box and try and choose the one that I think is going to work. And so next year, that's my main project.
This is as I don't know. I'm more used to back when I was writing. I was working with a colleague that draws. Making a graphic novel is difficult, but I find this as the concise, the comic strip, the short gag. I find it as difficult as doing a graphic novel requires an ideal. You say that you have to develop and the characters, the world, etc. But this making each week a concrete job that works. I don't know. I find it really. I don't know. Personally, I don't know if I could be able to do it. Honestly.
Right. Well, I find it very satisfying, and it's like solving a puzzle. And
Exactly.
when you get it done, it's very enjoyable and very satisfying. I don't know. It may well be as hard as making a graphic novel, but for some reason, the hardness and difficulty of it feels easier for me to deal with. It's not easier, but it's easier to fit into my life somehow.
Le he preguntado si el siguiente proyecto suyo, si tiene pensado, aparte de seguir las tiras cómicas, por supuesto, un proyecto de una novela gráfica. Él me ha dicho que le encanta hacer estas tiras, que se siente más cómodo con ellas, pero que bueno, el formato de novela gráfica le encanta, que en algún momento volverá. Le he preguntado yo personalmente, que bueno, yo hace años escribía con un colega que hacía dibujos, intentábamos hacer novelas gráficas, y que, aunque para mí el formato de novela gráfica, hacer un cómic es, perdón, por no usar el micro, hacer un cómic es, vamos a conocerlo, muy difícil, desarrollar un mundo, personajes, etc. Yo le he contado que a mí me parece incluso más difícil el cada semana tener que contar una mini historia. A mí me parece una locura. Yo le he dicho que no sería capaz de hacerlo. Él me ha dicho que para él es incluso más fácil. No es que sea más fácil, sino que se encuentra más cómodo haciendo este formato de estos gags rápidos que con la novela gráfica, pero que sin duda volver a la novela gráfica. Y no sé, creo que estas buenas preguntas deberían ser para vosotros. Si tenéis alguna pregunta que queráis hacer, I'm going to ask them if they have another question for you, and I will try to translate it
Okay, great.
as well as I can. Yes.
When I read The Revenge of the Librarian, I was sending photos to my brother all the time because he loves Hemingway, so I was trying to tease him, you know. So my question is, have you ever met someone who's been angry with you because you made jokes about this or that author?
Do you want to do that into Italian first, or shall I just answer? Okay.
It's a question for you.
Okay. No, I think I'm incredibly lucky as somebody who makes cartoons and shares them on the internet that I get an incredibly small amount of unpleasant or angry replies to my things. I think it's maybe because people who aren't interested or books and books and literature or science will just not look at the cartoons. They'll glaze over and move on. And I think the people who are into those things pick up the fact that when I'm making fun of people or teasing them, it's done the way, or I like to think it's done the way you tease your friends, the way you can make fun of them, but you know you love them really. So it's not done in a vicious way. And there might be some gentle satire in there from time to time, but I think my kind of overwhelming love of books and literature and my respect for science and most scientists comes across. You know, I get things wrong from time to time and people correct me, and I get things right and people still correct me. But that's what happens on the internet. And no, I can't think of any times when somebody who seems reasonable has had a problem with it.
La pregunta de ella ha sido que me ha encantado el cómic de La rabia de los libreros y que si alguna vez ha tenido algún problema, porque es verdad que La rabia de los libreros hay pues pequeñas bromas. La venganza de los libreros.
La venganza de los bibliotecarios.
La venganza de los bibliotecarios, que con tanta traducción entre inglés y español me pierdo. Si ha habido alguna vez algún problema con por los chistes que hace sobre autores, si alguien le ha dicho alguna vez, pues ha cabreado por esos chistes. Él ha respondido que, bueno, en internet obviamente, pues de vez en cuando la gente se enfada un poco, pero que la gente que realmente lee, o realmente la gente que realmente interesa los libros y conoce a los autores, lee estas tiras y entiende el respeto con el que se hace. Es como él ha dicho que es como si bromearas sobre un amigo al que amas, que te metes un poco con él, pero que él dice que su abrumador el amor por los libros se nota en el libro, y que la gente que no le interesa, que no le interesa, por ejemplo, Hemingway, no lo va a leer. Así que ha dicho una cosa muy curiosa, de que él no ha recibido nunca una crítica de alguien, por decirlo así, responsable, de alguien que sepa del tema. ¿Alguna pregunta más?
La puedo hacer en inglés y luego la traduzco.
Sí, sí.
Hi, I just wanted to say I love the strips. I'm a professor of English literature and I actually use them in class to illustrate some points.
Great.
So they're great, and I do think they're written from somebody who loves books. But, so I've got two questions. One, who is your ideal reader? Who do you have in mind when you create these strips? For example, the ones on literature, because they can work if you don't know much about the author or the book, but sometimes they have like another level that you do enjoy if you know about them. And the other is your children's book. I really loved it as well. So how is it different when you write for children? Sí que le he preguntado cuál es en quién piensa cuando escribe, si alguien que sabe más de literatura o no, y si es diferente escribir un libro para niños del libro para adultos.
I think you kind of put your finger on it there, where you said that the cartoons have those two layers to them. Well, sometimes they just have one layer. But what I guess my ideal reader in both cases is someone a bit like me, who is a fan of literature, who's interested in literature or science, but isn't professional really. And when I'm playing off the knowledge of an author's work, I try and choose an author generally where there's a common conception of what that work is. So I probably do more Jane Austen cartoons than the average, but she's kind of brilliant, because even if you've never read a Jane Austen novel, you have an idea of that, so I can play off the idea. And then, as you say, I can sometimes have a little Easter egg or another level, which, if you're a fan, you can enjoy. And I'd never do it the other way around, unless I failed by accident, where you really need in-depth knowledge of a writer to get the joke. I never want people to feel these are for people with a PhD. And that's easier with the science ones, because I genuinely don't have that knowledge. Whereas having worked around literature for a while, I can get, there's probably certain jokes that I would like, but my ideal reader might not. And the children's book, it's incredibly different, and it's a difference I don't think I'd have known about until I had children. And what I realised when I was reading bedtime stories to them, and my book is very much a bedtime story for small children, is what you're writing is a script for a tired parent who is not a professional actor to perform for their child while the child enjoys the pictures. And comics are completely different. It's a solitary activity, and the joy can come from the deciphering of something, whereas a children's book, I think the best bedtime story children's books need to work like that, and need to make you as a tired parent a better performer. So you need to write to be read aloud, and for that book my wife read it aloud to me, my kids read it aloud, I read it aloud, and we worked on it so it was performable, which is something I never do with my comics.
Bueno, las respuestas han sido de que el lector ideal suyo es un poco alguien como él, alguien que ama los libros y que va a entender un poco estas referencias, pero dice que le gusta usar, por ejemplo, autores como Jane Austen. Es verdad que en el cómic de los libreros hay unas cuantas tiras relacionadas con Jane Austen, que es un autor que aunque no hayas leído algún libro suyo, entiendes perfectamente lo que quiere decir Jane Austen, con lo cual vas a pillar la broma.
Dice que es verdad que hay veces que pone como esas dobles lecturas, que si conoces un poquito más lo vas a disfrutar, pero que su intención, me ha hecho una frase muy curiosa, muy buena, es que no quiere que para leer su cómic, para entender su cómic, tengas que tener un doctorado. Su autoridad es alguien que, pues eso, alguien que ama los libros, pero tampoco tiene un conocimiento completamente académico. Y respecto a los libros para niños, he hecho una cosa, has dicho, you have done a great thing about the child books. Dice que son historias de cama, son historias para leer, para que los niños se vayan a dormir, bedtime stories, pero que las escribe con el concepto de que es un guión para padres cansados que se lo van a leer a sus hijos mientras los hijos disfrutan de los dibujos. O sea, que la idea que tiene él cuando escribe, que es algo completamente diferente a lo que hace, puede escribir un cómic normal o las tiras, es un guión literal que un padre pueda leer al ladito a su niño para que se duerma. Dice que en su casa, cuando leen los libros, cuando está escribiendo el libro, su esposa se lo lee a él lo lee a sus hijos se lo lee a él, vamos, que está todo el mundo leyendo en su casa en alto cuando está haciendo el libro. Y yo creo que ya está. Muchas gracias a todos por esta charla. Ha sido más corta. I would love to talk a lot more with you, but we have, as always, we have constrained by time. Gracias a todos por venir y gracias. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you very much.